Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery, and crack. We have a Patreon. At Weshtern Philosophy Pod, don't forget the H. If you're enjoying the show and would like to see it grow, you can join this or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link, both in the show notes below. On today's episode, after a bit of a check-in, we discuss the topic of reciprocity.
I just remember how freeing it was for me in China to stop saying please and thank you. I love that idea of like just being able to bluntly ask for what I need. One of the ways to say hello in China is 你吃饭了吗? Like you say hello by saying, have you eaten yet? And if your answer is not a resounding yes, the first thing you'll do is eat. And I loved that. Because like that's what you're talking about is like this broad reciprocity. It's not like I buy you a pint today, you buy me a pint tomorrow. It's that we have this guanxi, we have a relationship that is of a nature where whatever you give me today, in the broad scheme of our relationship, will be repaid.
The world repeat issue. Tribalism, cross, 7th of April. You know, and it will all be over if you say those words.
For those who have just joined us.
Geez, I hope so.
Yeah.
We're not doing a live stream.
Actually, weirdly enough, on the OBS, I just hit live stream instead of record video. I hit live stream, and it was like Twitch stream URL missing. And I had this like tiny moment of panic because we haven't recorded in a couple of weeks, and I was like, "Are we Twitch streamers or podcast?"
We are. We would be so happy. Just go and play video games for 2 hours a week and talk shite. Wow.
I wouldn't hate that, Bart. I wouldn't hate that. And we were just dealing out. We have our little notebooks. I have a little green notebook, and Bart has a little brown notebook. And if we have ideas while we're podding, we can write them down on this. And we were joking about what happened if we swapped notebooks. If we that's basically like are we going to do it? Right?
No. We're not going to swap.
We're going to delve into each other's pod minds.
This is so Anthony. I cannot even fucking read what he has written because secrecy is of the utmost importance. Literally, nearly nothing. Receivery? Mrs. Doyle. Oh, this. Yeah. What word is that?
Okay. That says receiving Mrs. Doyle.
Well,
I think the one above it says either penultimate or pediatric.
You're such a doctor.
Yep.
This is Dr. Zhang. He didn't think Chinese was hard enough for people to get, so he had to add an extra level.
Isn't it
of
terrifying
obfuscation.
that doctors are renowned for their terrible handwriting?
Yeah, you would say there lies a bit of a danger in that.
Yeah.
It does. But it is funny though when you can't always... No, I can read my own handwriting. Meticulous. Truth. Am I wrong?
I am going to readjust your little lav mic if that's okay.
Go on.
You know,
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's...
Meow. What was the problem? Was it...
The direction it's facing. So this way,
Okay, so
I
it has
think
to be...
less bleed.
How does it have to be? I can't see it.
Pointing
straight up.
Yeah.
Straight up. Okay.
Although Neil O'Brien told me, and I'm not sure if he was screwing with me, that it's meant to point down.
Good chance.
Yeah, I know.
Well, if it's very loud, I suppose, but then you're only getting like really roundabout fucking sound. Well, you can try whatever you want. So mic level 12, okay.
Yeah, let's see how this goes.
Oh God, the poor ears of the listeners.
I know.
We should definitely make a note this time.
Yeah. We're gently segueing. Segueing isn't even the right word. I'm imagining like when a boat has been in the shed in the boathouse all winter, and it's like just edging its way down the skip into the water for the first dip of the summer. Yeah, that's where we're going. We are gradually re-entering the world of podcasting. Because it's been a busy couple of weeks.
Jizz that it was. Now, it's always kind of... we were just joking beforehand. We were like, what themes are alive in us right now? Oh yes, tiredness and overwhelm.
Yeah,
we can't keep coming back to those all the time.
We've kind of gone to that well quite a bit.
Yeah, it's like we definitely need to learn something.
Hey guys, we're back for season 3 with more tiredness and overwhelm. We know what you want, and we've got even more of it: lethargy, confusion. Panic.
Well, that's probably the problem, is that we're not doing the lethargy. Probably we would get it out of our system if we would just go, hello everyone.
Yeah.
But we always give energy when there's no more to give.
Oh my God.
Anyway, Anthony got married for the second time.
I did.
It was the real one.
I had to be sure is the joke I kept saying.
Yeah, and I heard you say a few times as well, that you'll get it right the third time, which I thought was funny.
But I should married the second time to the same woman. I think is probably worth.
No, that's good.
Clarifying.
That is good. Yeah. That is good. For all your philandering ways, I'm glad you did settle on the same woman in the end. But it was lovely. Mm-hmm. Jesus, we've had some weather.
Yeah.
I honestly cannot remember. Well, the start of COVID was kind of like this.
The first summer
where
of
we
COVID,
had like 3 months of no rain, but it even feels nicer. Well, it probably was because we weren't all terrified in our houses, but either of the disease or authoritarianism, pick your poison. But it was like, it's been just lovely. Mm-hmm. It's just been blue skies, sunshine. And then one of the things I really appreciate as well is that here we kind of front load our misery, I think, in Ireland. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of rain, but then when it gets nice, it's very nice and it stays beautiful and green because there's so much fucking water in the ground. Yep. Whereas a lot of parts in Europe are already kind of going, we're going to have to, you know, my mum in Holland has been like watering the plants, getting everything like, and we're just like, nah, it's fine. I mean, I think we gave a little bit of water to some new bits in the garden, but so that's the upside. So for your wedding, the weather was fabulous, so much so that some of the guests fainted.
Yep. We had the ceremony outdoors in Bart's field, and I'm going to say up top, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I don't want to commoditize my wedding into a podcast episode.
No, but I do.
Yeah,
so
that's fair. And you did an awful lot of work on the wedding. And
yes,
if this is
I need all the.
Well, I think we mentioned this even like, I don't know, last year when I asked you or something, and I was like, "Would you be my best man, Bart?" And you were like, "Oh my God, it's such an honor. You know, you're really doing me a great favor here." And I was like, "There's no favor. I'm going to work you like a fucking dog." And I did.
Well, it was even worse because you didn't work me like a dog. You were like Lord Veterinary. Yeah. You let me work myself like a dog. I was like, "Anthony, this has not been sorted," and you're like, "Yeah, you can just leave it if you want." I'm like, No, we can't. You know we can't leave it like this. But it was great fun, and no, we're not going to go in too deep. The only thing I will say, which I think is the main point I was thinking about when we say a little bit about it, is that we say it was a wedding, but really it was Comic-Con for the podcast.
Oh yeah,
there was absolutely. You basically had no friends there. You just invited podcast listeners.
That's right. Yeah,
it was really funny to hear so many people say like, "Oh, we listened to the podcast," and obviously most of them are just friends who listen for that reason. But it was funny because some of them I really didn't know.
Well, no, like on my half, obviously, some friends and family and that have been saying to me for a while, "Oh, I can't wait to meet Bart." And there was a moment where we were like sat at a table and I realized we were surrounded by your little fan group. I was like, "Oh yeah, him and her and okay, they've all come together. It's just me and Bart and you know
it was very
what would we call
funny.
them? The Bartletts?
Oh no. Yeah. Oh, that feels disgusting. And I'm not even enjoying that as much as I thought I would. I would expect myself to kind of go, But it was very fun because it does allow for a nice entrance into conversations where some people just plain up try to start a podcast with me. It was so funny. Just like, "So Bart, interior monologue. What do you think about," or whatever, or something like that. It was Kelsey. Hi, Kelsey.
Future podcast guest.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, Kelsey, while I have you, I was very disappointed where you just at the very last went, I'm not going to be on, and obviously you're going to be on. So that's just for you. Now we're going to go back to talking to everyone, but you are going to be on, and I was too tired at the very end to wrangle you properly. But just so you know, but no, it was really fun, and it's.
Podcast guests.
No, I'm not. I've not lost my train of thought. I'm making a decision whether I should say something or not, because it's so pompous.
Oh, then definitely.
No, you're not going to like it. No, it's not the kind where you're going to like it. No, I'll keep it a bit. But someone texted me who was listening to the podcast while we were doing the wedding, and she was like that the warmth of our friendship transcended the friendship itself, so that people could warm themselves by it, which I thought was such a lovely thing to say.
That's
one of the nicest things, and I did feel that during the wedding. There was just a nice sense of friendship, but not just us, but everyone there. There was a real love for you guys that was beautiful, and really eclectic fucking people, which is great as well.
Yeah.
You're all weirdos.
I know. It was so funny. Katie's aunt, Katie had a lot of family traveling from California, her mother's side of the family. So Katie's aunt had a bit of a sore back, and she asked me, she was like, Anthony, is there anyone at the wedding that might be able to fix a sore back? And I was like, there will be 30 people at the wedding that could fix your back. And then I thought for a moment, I was like, actually, all my friends are either musicians or body workers or both. So it was a really cool crew. We had the ceremony in Bart's Field, and we were obviously bricking it, being the start of May, which is Scaraveen. So it's the last 2 weeks of April, first 2 weeks of May, where it's like, it looks nice, but you should wear a jacket because it's colder than it looks traditionally. In Scotland, they say, "Né cast a clút till May's ut." Don't take off any clothes until the end of May.
That's funny. That sounded nearly Dutch. Sometimes in Scotland, they have things that sound quite Dutch, like they say stain instead of stone, and that's Dutch, stuff like that. But anyway, carry on.
But it was roasting. It was absolutely.
Oh, and you guys were taking it so fucking handy with everything. It was I had a real bit of a culture clash moment, which doesn't happen to me that often anymore, but it was like, we're obviously fucking organized Dutch bastards. And so, you know, and thank goodness there was 4 or 5 Dutch people on hand sorting everything out at our gaff, which was great. But yeah, you guys were really taking it handy with especially the photos when people were just sitting in our field exposed, baking. Yeah. And then I was like, this shows me another side to the practitioner, Anthony. He's like, I will run around minding people who fainted in the evening, but I will let them bake in the morning. That's very mean. I'm joking.
Practitioner Anthony comes and goes.
Yeah. But it was absolutely lovely, and you couldn't have had nicer weather, which I think is probably just for you guys.
And in fairness, the ceremony was quite short. So even though people were waiting a little bit before, they were out of there quick. And the ceremony, I think, was only about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah, we're already going into this into much more detail than I thought you would be happy with. But anyway, I thought it was very nice. And the energy in the field since has been beautiful. We left we had a maypole, and we had the maypole up for a while. And like, my kids started just laying below the maypole afterwards. It was just like, this is brilliant. Everyone loved the energy. So I was even like hesitant to tidy it up. Yeah. But no, it did the land good as well, which is lovely. There's something about when you have that many lovely people, there's something really nice about a wedding like that, where you look out into the crowd and you go, these are all amazing people, and they're all directing their energy towards you guys and your marriage. And it is like it's building an energetic house for your marriage. Yeah. It's really nice. And I know this wasn't a legal marriage because that was the American one, but still, to me, that feels very real. That one is with the state, and one is with your life, in a way. Well, I'm not saying, you know what I mean.
No, but it's ritual, and ritual is very important to myself and Katie. Like, we didn't just want to have a wedding. We were like, why do people get married, and what's important about that, and just in very general terms, like, bearing in mind the season. So it was Bjaltana, So it was the start of May. So we had Maypole. We had some references to Bealtaine, the fire festival of Celtic traditions.
Is that the fire festival? Because St. John's Fire is in the summer, but that's for midsummer.
Yes, yeah.
But you would call this the fire festival?
Well, Bealtaine, the theory is that it's Tina Baal, so the fire of Baal, who is the Egyptian fire god, because there is that connection with Scotia, and like there's some overlap between Egyptian and Greek and Celtic mythology as well. So that's one theory for Bealtaine. But
what's Scotia?
Scotia was an Egyptian princess who was exiled, and she died. Her grave is outside Tralee, and then the idea is that her sister went on to Scotland and named Scotland after her. So Scotia is named after Scotland is named after an Egyptian princess. And then you got Nova Scotia and New Scotland over in Canada and so on. So the same route. So there was the idea of just paying tribute to the time of year that it was, and the element that's associated with that, and then also the place where it was, like having it in your field, and like the field that you mined and you were like in custodianship of. And we had just like a little bit where we had a little bit of a ceremony with water, and we invited your lovely daughter Lou up to offer some of the water to the land, because in fairness, you can't have a ritual, you can't have a wedding ceremony without land to stand on and have it. So we had Lou offer a bit of the water to the land, and she in a very like devout, sacred way offered it to the land. She was so sweet. She was like, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, now splash a bit on Bart, now a little bit back on the
She's quite, as someone who likes to do theatre, she's definitely caught that bug from me, where she's very aware of when there's an audience. She's quite good at knowing, I need to be this much serious. Like she would never have thrown all of it into my lap. But she was like, the land, this is all good. Ceremony's been done. Bit of messing with Dad. Everyone will enjoy that. But you know,
it was
just
perfection. It was.
And she's always had it, because we were at a wedding in Clonakilty when she was very young. She was 4, and she was a flower girl, and she just ran up, or wasn't it Clonakilty? What's the seaside part of Clonakilty? John Spillane did an advert for it.
Not sure.
Really nice.
Not Kinsale.
No. It's like it doesn't matter anyway. But so it was beautiful by the sea, blah blah. And then she just ran up and just threw like the flowers into their faces, and it was just like everyone was laughing. It was kind of she's always had that. But I loved that it was the ritual. Like you guys are very mindful of that unseen part of something like that, which I think is great, because everything gets paid attention to in the proper way.
Well, what I thought was really interesting was that they might have just been being polite, but I think the guests really enjoyed that. And like, it's nothing we're like inventing. Like we wrote the ceremony ourselves with Bronwyn Kavanagh, the amazing artist musician who designed it with us and performed it. But I think just including stuff like that, people just connect with it, because they're universal things. The time of the year, the ritual, the land you're standing on, you know, stuff with like elements, fire and water and nature and so on. Like, it's weird that some people might consider them other, because they're actually like, it's weird to ignore them. You know, I think if you are having an event, it's happening in a certain place at a certain time. Why not pay tribute to the place and the time that it's happening, you know? And I think it does ground people. It brings them into the event, and it was really lovely. It was really lovely, and then just great crack.
But I do think I want to just say something about that, because I think they're when you're open to that stuff, it's so palpable. Because it was like, I had a whole thing where a lot of little things went wrong, like my lawnmower, I got it fixed just beforehand, and then it broke down again, and the guy was like literally welding it in the field like the day before Bealtaine, and it was just like, because Bealtaine was the day before your wedding, and it's just like, and he was there, and he was like soldering stuff in just in the field, getting it done, and they're like, our field is surrounded by hawthorns and fairy trees, and I remember saying it to Bronwyn as well, I was like, if you go between those fairy trees today, you'll probably never come back. Like it was something that you could just feel, and then
Bron would immediately.
oh yeah, she was just like, I'm going, bye. This world is not for me. But no, it's definitely drawn to the other side, I'd say. Yeah. But and then there was like I was saying this to you. I said something like, "Oh, there's a bit of mischief. It's grand. It's good. We can do this here. But there's a bit of mischief about which makes sense for the good people and all that around that time of year." Yeah. And then I texted that to you, and the same moment I texted that, there was just like a huge double rainbow over the field that was there for like half an hour. It didn't go away, and I was just like, yeah, there's something really magical. And then when you acknowledge that, I think it makes a ceremony much more powerful. I've been to a lot of civil ceremonies in the Netherlands where it just felt really wrong to me. It's so man-made. It's purely man-made. This is obviously also man-made, but it's in interaction with all those forces, at least to some extent. Whereas, funnily enough, the word that kept coming up when you were saying it just there is charm. I hate it when there's no charm to something. Oh my God, when people are charmless, it really is a kick in my balls. I really don't like it. And I've seen that like celebrants, like civil, like so they're kind of attached to the county. Well, obviously it works different in Holland, but like you would say, a lot of people in Holland would say, oh, we get married for the municipality, for the gemeente trouwen, which is just like, and gemeente also means community, but it's definitely more related to the authority. And there's like, we don't really have counties like that, but it's more like there are like a couple hundred gemeentes in the Netherlands, and they have quite a bit of influence. Then the middle province level has only a tiny bit of influence, and then the national level has a lot of influence. Okay. But so a lot of people, I think you could, I don't know if that's still the case, but you could always get married for free on a Friday at the gemeentehuis, at the municipality house. Right. So a lot of people would do that, and then would still have a party somewhere else or whatever, but there's not that much ceremony, there's not that much church either, you know. And then you would quite often get assigned one of these civil servants who would do that, and some of them are brilliant and some of them are dog shit. And when people are just like, well, I've only just met them, but they seem nice, and I'm just like, oh, will you shut the fuck up? Like that stuff just is like fingernails on the blackboard of my soul. I'm just like, if we're gonna do this, and if we're not gonna have a lot of intentionality, like you guys had a lot of intentionality, which I loved. It's like, oh, you thought about that and this, and you gave Yvonne a role because you're like, this is also her land. And beautiful, lovely, meaningful to everyone, meaningful to the participant, the people seeing it, to the land, great. But then if it's like, okay, we're not doing that, it's very towards the authority and it's man-made, that's fine, but then at least be a little bit charming. At least do it with a bit of grace about you. And if you can't do that, why are you here? I know that sounded a lot heavier than I meant it to, but I hate that. It was funny, there was no, I won't. It's too, But I think it is an interesting,
whether you're doing this for man or whether you're doing it for something, like the difference between humanity within nature or just humanity, like human systems.
And then I'm just thinking, maybe the word is charmed. Something becomes charmed when it is done with that kind of intentionality, or there's definitely a lot more magic in the air if you ride the streams of energy that are already there, rather than going, well, this is only, when people say this is only, I always just think, oh, that's such a dumb... You hear certain physicists do that sometimes. Well, surely the universe is only a random or whatever. And you're like, anyone who says something is only either is dogmatic or hasn't taken time to understand it.
Well, I think a lot of the time materialists confuse describing something with explaining it.
Yes.
Love is only a collection. The process of releasing oxytocin in the brain. You're like, no, that's the process. That's you're describing the mechanistic process of love. You are not explaining love at all.
Exactly.
There are two very, very different things. And then when you're like, well, the universe is just random chaos, you're like, well, to the level of your understanding.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's fair enough. But to say that, no, we've got it, when you don't, science is always progressing. So it will continue
and always
to
at the boundary of something.
There's that lovely line, I think it's from the Kybalion, where it's like, chance is but a name for a law not yet understood.
Yeah. Boom.
So like, yeah, I think that is a frustrating way to look at things, where you're just like, well, it's just this, and it can be true for people. Like, I know people for whom marriage is very much a business transaction, and I wouldn't even think particularly less of it for that. Like, people need lots of ways to move through the world with other people, and people can get married for lots of different reasons and so on. But yeah, for me, for us, it was very important to link it to the land, to nature, to stuff that's bigger than us, and also not separate from us, because we are part of nature as well. So that's the nice thing.
No, I think you guys did a great job, and it was really fun, and it was just beautiful, and I mean, to be able to do it in this beautiful part of the world with sunshine, it's just the best.
We were so obviously Katie, like a lot of people traveled for this on Katie's side, on my side too, and for a lot of people it was their first time in Ireland, and we were at a restaurant somewhere. We were getting served a crepe, and the owner was from Cork, and Katie was just talking about like how the lovely weather and stuff, and as he handed us our food at the end, he was like, enjoy the weather, it's bizarre.
So good. It's so good. It's bizarre.
And you're like, yeah, like I was telling people, I was like, don't come back, never come back, it's never going to be as good as this. Like, it's been extraordinary,
and for such a long time well, but it was really nice. And then it was funny when we were having the dinner and people started passing out, that you went into practitioner mode, and I thought, oh, isn't it interesting then if when you're that's what I was saying about culture clash, that in Holland, I've obviously been to a lot of Irish weddings, and I've also been like a groomsman in Irish weddings and stuff, but I hadn't really realized the extent to which a best man is also a master of ceremony to an extent. And in Holland there is just the master of ceremony, so the person who does the speech doesn't have to be worrying about organizing things, and he can just be there with the groom or whatever. But it was funny as well that it just becomes very free for people to go, oh, can you sort this out? Can you do this? And it kind of, I was thinking in a way, it's nice when a role is that clearly, well, for me, the organizational part wasn't clearly defined, but in the wedding itself, when it's all moving, then it's like, oh yeah, you have to stand by this and you have to do that. And it was really funny when you started becoming the practitioner, Anthony, helping people out who'd fainted. That was just like, I'm now just going to follow him. And normally that would be like, he would be very annoyed, but now I just have the divine right to do this. And I'm just basically here to see that if there's anything that he doesn't need to be doing, because like he can assess something, but then if someone needs to hold a cold pack to someone else can do that, and he can go back to but then also I knew you didn't mind slipping away sometimes for a little bit of a movement, maybe,
well, we were moving the whole time, but like also you need to make sure people are all right. It was a very, very, very hot day, but it was well, one thing we learned as well was that myself and Katie like to be quite organized. I know it didn't seem it, but like we really tried to get as much done in advance as we could. And the amount of stuff that just like in the days leading up to the wedding, people were just like, oh yeah, no, that's not sorted at all, Like in hindsight, we could have left everything until 2 weeks before the wedding and it would have been 80% the same, like the outcome, because there was still like stuff 10 p.m. the night before, still sorting stuff out frantically. But the roles within the wedding and the asking for help, because so many of our friends came through for us, and I'm not going to turn this into a big thank you.
No, but do not name them. They don't deserve it. I only take the credit. I'm on this fucking thing.
Well, that's it. But they know who they are, and they were wonderful. But it was making me think of exchange, because to go back to that joke where I was like, yeah, you're my best man, I'm going to work you like a fucking dog. But like that is part of it. Like when I was asking you, I was like asking you for a big ask, and then we had the idea of like doing it on your land as well. And this idea of like asking for help and receiving it. So what I'm thinking for the title of the episode might be something like exchange or something like this, because it could be quite hard for some people to ask for help. It could be quite hard to receive help. It could be quite hard to, inconvenience another person. And like, to just be like, yeah, it's our wedding. In a weird way, it's like, it's important we're happy and relaxed and as undistracted as possible so that we can hold the space and create this like event that hopefully loads of people are going to enjoy, but it requires an awful lot of effort. Yeah. And just like how much I asked of you, Bart, and how much you delivered, and not just you, your wife, your family, your friends. I will shout out Eliza, who came all the way from Holland to hang out for a couple of days and to help with the household and mind your kids.
But she's like a busybody like me, so she loved when I just went, you're sorting this out. She's like, yeah, I've got it. You send it up. Yeah. But I think the topic of exchange, it's interesting because I think this definitely goes for you and me, but I think for a lot of people who were raised in the Judeo-Christian society, I think there is something, and I actually don't think this is necessarily part of the original philosophy, but probably installed by the church and stuff, that there is this kind of thing with guilt and with suffering to receive, like you have to, like our lovely previous guest Breed O'Donoghue said to me once, she's like, sometimes it seems that people think the carpet in heaven will be plusher the more they've suffered on earth. And what I've been finding out in recent years, and with changing a lot with this, is that actually it's very easy to do a lot for people with whom you have an open and equal relationship. But it's when you feel you need to give something that you actually don't want to give, it becomes very tricky. And I think I've been guilty of this in the past, because it's not necessarily always the person taking it who's creating that. You know, it's also the person who's given endlessly of themselves who is creating that, maybe even more so. Yeah. But I think with this wedding, I kind of really felt like, oh yeah, we put in a lot of effort, and that was no bother. Yeah. Like obviously it was physical bother, but there's no strain on there's an appropriate. There's no strain on the relationship. Yeah. There's no, that kind of way, I think. And I think I'm getting more and more closer to those kinds of friendships and relationships where you're not, like even when you're like a couple and your parents, where you go like, well, I did this, so can you do that? And you, especially when you're tired. And I do think sometimes the part that everyone knows this, but it's different when you actually witness it, is how kind of endless the need can be when you have small kids. Where you can be, we all know what it's like to be tired, we all know what it's like to be worked to the bone, but it's different when there's a small person who's just like, yeah, you haven't slept for 10 days, but still I'm going to need you right now because I just got sick because we didn't sleep well for 10 days and now, or something like that. And then you do get sometimes as parents or something, you can get a bit like, I'm just so tired, can you do this because I did that? And it makes complete sense because you're just completely wrecked. Yeah. But me and Yvonne have been saying like, oh, we want to, and we have been getting out of that more and more, because it's like, sometimes in those times we'll both be wrecked and we're both really trying. Mm-hmm. So it really requires something different than that kind of guilt thing or that kind of martyr mode. Because there's that phrase, like I'm thinking is exchange probably isn't exactly the right word, but like the phrase... because it's actually not exchange in a way. Exactly, because the other phrase is give and take. And that's exactly, like even the phrase give and take implies 50% give, 50% take. And like ideally on a long time scale, it roughly ends up like that. But like, you're not in a 50-50 relationship with your children. Like you're not, and like, it was really weird. Like you've said this as well, that like you did an awful lot for me and Katie, your whole family did. Yeah. And right now that scale is very tipped, and there's just an awareness of that. And like we, as friends, we're just like, we'll sort ourselves out. It'll come right at some point in the future. And but in the moment, it's quite tough to watch somebody go to that much trouble for you. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And it reminds me of China. In China,
I'm listening to you, but I need
you're
to,
all good. Do what you have to do. But in China, they have a concept called guanxi, which is, it's often translated as relationship or mutual reciprocity, mutual favor doing, or something like this. So there's this idea that polite speech is only used with people you are not friendly with. So if you're actually in a good state with somebody, if you're actually good mates with somebody, you don't need to be saying please or thank you. Because if you're in guanxi with somebody, you use politeness to replace guanxi. So like if you don't have guanxi, then you need to lean on politeness. You need to be really nice to people. If you actually have guanxi, if you have this like mutual give and take reciprocity, you don't need to say please and thank you anymore. You walk into somebody's house and you go, I'm hungry, and they feed you, you know. And this was the interesting thing, is I found that when I was in China, a lot of the times Chinese friends would often ask me for a favor quite early on in our friendship. And it would often be quite a big favor. You know, can you help me out for half a day here at this event or something like this? I'd be like, oh, that's, as an Irish person, I'm like, that's a big ask, you know. But what it is it's actually giving you an opportunity to establish guanxi. So you do the favor for them. But what I didn't realize for a while is that it's now on me to ask them for a favor at some point. And like, if I need help for something, then I need to kind of bluntly say, hey, can you help me out with this? And this is guanxi, when we start like doing for each other like this. A very foreign concept to Irish people, where we're just like, are you okay? Sure, I don't want to be putting you to any trouble.
Also, like, I'm slightly confused. Part of that is because I was on my bloody phone, which I hate, but it was a big work thing I needed to respond to. Sorry. That's always the funny thing. We do this on work days. Yeah. So sometimes something will come in and you're like, I'm going to lose a lot of money if I don't respond to this message.
And I could pause the pod.
No, but I feel a bit bad now because usually I don't, but I knew I had to respond to that. But so the guanxi, is it like, so it isn't the kind of very free give and take, or is it? Because you say they kind of introduce this quite quickly, but is it merely to set up the grounds of the relationship or the exchange rate of the relationship?
So what I will say is I don't know exactly, but my feeling is that they're almost doing you a favor by asking you for a favor. Because if you then
give you space.
Well, if they're like, I want you to, like one friend of mine was like, she was starting an English school, and she was like, I want you to come stand in the heat for like 7 hours, meet and greet, be the foreigner face at the English school. I'm like, oh my God. And I did it. But at the time I didn't really understand guanxi. But what it is that if I needed anything else after that, even a really big favor, like a day out of her, you know, whatever it could be, help translating something or applying for a visa, or, you know, booking like a really awkward train ticket, or even like help going somewhere rural, because I've done that favor, I can then ask for a favor. But it's not exactly keeping track, but it's this idea of mutual reciprocity. I suppose it's this idea of announcing to the other person, I'm like, I'll help you out, you help me out. And then we're like, you can rely on me, I guess.
We're entering into a reciprocal relationship is kind of what you're saying. Well, that's interesting. And would the guanxi be the type of relationship? Or would it be the act of...
In Chinese, verbs and nouns are often the same. Yeah. So like you could be guanxiing, or it could be an adjective. It could be this relationship is a bit of a... Or it could be a noun. But... you can have relationships with somebody without it being guanxi, and you see this a lot in business, like in China, where it's like, if you don't have guanxi, then, you know, it's very much like, you know, we'll do the kind of the bare minimum kind of thing, you know, and there's no inherent longevity to it. We will hang out for as long as, you know, this business relationship makes sense for us. But if you do develop a guanxi relationship with business people, then you're like, all of a sudden you're having dinner with them. You're maybe your One thing I found about guanxi is like with the people I'm lucky enough to have guanxi with, all the privileges I get of the relationship, Katie gets as well. Just immediately. Yeah. That's one of the things about guanxi, is that it's familial. That's you nice. Know. And it is really nice. Like there's a lot asked, but there's an awful lot given as well. And all of it's much warmer, even if it is a business relationship. It's a much warmer, personable business relationship. So I think every culture, because you often see articles about guanxi going like, there's this weird Asian practice that is baffling businessmen, and you need to understand this to to get by in the country. And I would say that it's true. It does make life easier when you understand it. But my overall point is that I think every culture has stuff like this.
Yeah.
I think Chinese culture has labeled it, has systematized it, as saying guanxi is this and is not this, and you do this to establish guanxi, and doing this would break guanxi, and so on. It has it's quite explicit. But I actually think every culture...
Break guanxi?
Well, if you...
I think I've heard you talk about this before.
Yeah, there's a concept called meimianzi, which is like if you...
stop the reciprocity.
Or you embarrass somebody, or, you don't meet your guanxi obligations. There's also the dark side of guanxi, which is kaihomen, which is opening the back door, which is like, let's say you're in a career as an architect, and you're a very good architect, and you do your job really, really well, and by all accounts, you should get a promotion because you're good, you turn up on time, you do a good job, your clients are happy. But that's not enough. You also have to kaihomen, which is open the back door, which means like whoever's ahead of you, you have to make sure you have guanxi with them. You have to be giving them gifts. You have to be elevating them, and so on. So
it's a bit subservient.
It's not all positive. Like any of these systems, it can be abused. But my point is that I think every culture has systems of reciprocity, systems where you have to ask for things or offer things, and learning how to navigate these is more or less difficult for different cultures. So I think Irish people are quite bad at asking for things.
Yeah, and it makes it hard for everyone because you're just so uncomfortable asking for a thing that I think when you were speaking there, I was thinking that I do think Dutch working culture, thanks my love, is quite good with this stuff because the basis is really formal and clear. It's kind of like, or the basic kind of setup, it's just like when you do a service that's worth this, we agree beforehand it will be done on time. Like there's quite strict rules, and then if you keep doing that, there's a real joyfulness in a good working relationship. And that's something I've not seen a lot here. I've seen a lot of great informality and very joyous serendipitous meetings and connections, but it has more of a chaotic vibe. Whereas in the Netherlands, I have this image of, when people joyfully go to a job where they're all working, creating something together, and then that's actually very joyful. Like working can be quite joyful, and but it's funny that it starts with very clear, defined boundaries of like, you do this for me, you get paid that much, you won't be asked to do more than that. And even when we were talking about business interaction, that's going slightly tricky for me here locally, and it's funny that you and I would be very well able to go, okay, these are the points where it's going wrong. Where for other people involved, it's more like, oh, it's bad vibe or something, Whereas I think
it's more about the person maybe than
the
situation.
Whereas I'm just like, no, these rules, these inherent rules are being broken. But it's I find it very interesting. But I find it difficult here sometimes to, when you ask something of someone that you get that discomfort, really that Mrs. Doyle kind of feeling of like, oh no, you can't, or you don't have to, or the, so I'm kind of in halfway there because I come from a country where it's very clearly delineated, but then even though that stuff also happens there. Like I was actually just talking to friends who live in Holland but are both from elsewhere, and they were telling me about somewhere where the guanxi clearly wasn't honored, where they sort of said to someone, oh, you can have this if you take care of it or whatever, and they didn't, and then it actually cost them loads of effort, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh yeah, it obviously does happen in Holland as well. I always kind of in your head, you sometimes become a bit like black and white, where you go, over there it's all arranged properly and here it's very chaotic, and that's bollocks, because there's things that are really good over here and there's things that are really piss poor over there.
It's the same with me in guanxi, whereas like over in China I was like, it's weird that they have all these like hidden rules about how you relate to people, and then I was like, oh, we have them in Ireland too, I just don't acknowledge them because I grew up with them.
So normal to you. And I do sometimes get it wrong and I feel awkward about it. One I find tricky is that especially in business, I'm quite direct. So I would go, this is what I need, can we do it like that, boom boom boom. And then people here find that quite aggressive.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. So that's why quite often I will come to you or to other friends and go, can I say this? Is this okay?
Now, this was a few years ago, but you did come to me one time with a very important text message that you were about to send to some Irish people about a business thing. And you were like, is this okay? And I was like, I'm sure it's fine. I read it and I was like, oh God, no. No. We have some work to do here. Yeah. And it all worked out well. But
you have to make this a lot softer.
Yeah. I've used the word tactify with Katie a few times because like I'll write a text and I was like, Katie, could you just tactify that for me, please? Could you like dial it down by about 30%? Because, you know, sometimes I'm like so focused on the goal. I'm like, I just need this fixed.
Yeah.
But you have to, I suppose so that would be the Irish way of Guanchi, is that we always have to acknowledge the person, where we have to be, how are you getting on? Yeah, how's the family? Are you busy? You're getting out in the garden a small bit. Yeah, that's great. Could you fix my fucking lawnmower? Or whatever it is, you know. But it's like we always have to. Sorry, that was not a dig at the man who fixed your lawnmower.
No, he was brilliant. He was amazing.
But it was just the first thing that came to mind. But it's like, we do this where we acknowledge the humanity in people in Ireland, and that can be beautiful or frustrating depending on how much time you have.
Exactly. I always think like when you're just going through life and you might be, you know, it's like if when you're doing bits and you're receiving services and stuff, it's all fine because you can be really chill about that. You can be really chill about deadlines, you can be really chill about everything. But then when you're the person who needs to get something done, just like, oh God. Yeah. And like you said, like, if I need this, I just need this thing done. Can you just do this thing? I don't need to always have a huge social interaction. I think in the Netherlands sometimes, because that is so clear, it's like, I'm just here to do a job. Then actually that leaves a lot of space for a nice social interaction if you like people.
Sure.
And if you don't like people, you can just go, yeah, thanks, that's it, there's your money, bang, bye. But obviously, I fucking chose to live here. I do love that the personal is often seen.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting balance. But I suppose when we were talking about the wedding and all that stuff, like, because this is the surface, what we were discussing there is more the surface level. But when we're talking about the wedding and stuff, it's like when you with your deeper friendships, it is like reciprocity that never should be counted. But we all have an inherent feeling for it. There's something about reciprocal. I think it's nearly like with reciprocal play or something. It's like you just know everything needs to be a bit acknowledged as well. Like, I see that, thank you. That's usually a big one. But then also you can rely on it, so it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to be insecure about it. And nobody's counting, also because everyone's situation is very different. But I think it has a lot to do with the intention. The intention is very much like, no, you would be there for me, I would be there for you. But no one is, it's not a numerical thing because we could never get there. Yeah. I think. Yeah. It's too complex a game to tally that.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of a few things. Like, you were talking about the acknowledgement of it, and I just remember how freeing it was for me in China to stop saying please and thank you. You know, and again, there's good and bad to all of this, but like, I love that idea of like just being able to bluntly ask for what I needed. You know, it's very interesting. Like in one of the ways to say hello in Chinese is "你吃饭了吗?" Like, you say hello by saying, "Have you eaten yet?"
Oh, nice.
And if your answer is not a resounding yes, if your answer is like, "Oh, I had a bite a while ago," or not good enough, the first thing you'll do is eat. And I've ran into Chinese friends I haven't seen in 5 or 10 years, and they've said, "你吃饭了吗?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I want to chat a bit." And they're like, "No, we feed you now."
Yeah.
And I loved that.
Oh, that's perfect for you because you're a very hangry boy.
And it's nice to, because like that's what you're talking about, is like this broad reciprocity. It's not like I buy you a pint today and you buy me a pint tomorrow. It's that we have this guanxi, we have a relationship that is of a nature where whatever you give me today, in the broad scheme of our relationship, will be repaid at some time, in some form, in some way. It'll happen, but you're not looking at it
Yeah, but it's not even that you're kind of like waiting for it to be repaid, or it's more that you know that the intention is there to look after the other person as much as they would look after you, or something. Because also, like, if you look at the two of us, like, we're very different qualities. So it would be in a very different way anyway, and we've different situations, and so life is so complex. But we all have this intuitive thing of like, that's where it's breaking now.
Well, that's interesting when it's not reciprocal.
Yeah, which, like, to be clear, is clearly not the case with us, thank God, and hopefully it won't be. But if it would, we would be able to talk about it, which is, that's a big one, I do think. Like, openness to discuss this kind of thing, where I know that if I would go to you and go, hey, dude, that didn't feel great.
Yeah.
You would not just go, well, I remember when you did it. You know, you would take it on, and I that's the one, I suppose, where I get the tensest about this stuff, is where I'm just like, but that goes for most relational things. Is like, if people aren't open to take feedback on, it's just like,
I want to bring up one more thing, because I also love that thread, because I think it's important. We've been talking about the healthy depictions of these kind of reciprocal relationships.
Yeah,
and I think the unhealthy ones are really important too. And they're not even necessarily bad. There's some relationships, like with your kids, you're going to give more than you
always,
I suppose you'll get emotionally from them, in terms of like practical labor. Obviously, you're going to.
Yeah, but it's more of a thing. I think in the ideal world, your parents give you more than you could ever give them, and then you give your kids more than you could ever give them, and that's the way that goes around.
Yeah, and then there's like certain relationships where you're like, oh yeah, that friend, you know, they're never going to be able to give as much as I'm giving them, and you just have to decide then whether is that okay for you or not. Yeah, that's it. But I just think one other interesting manifestation of this, and I'm going to go full fucking intellectual, because this has been on my mind anyway. We need the woo,
what would that sound like?
The woo bell is gone. We need the up his own arse gong.
I was more thinking like a cerebral, and that, like, something that just goes some clockworky.
You mean like some laboratory kind of?
Or no, it's more like a clockworky thing that we would turn on and we just go.
Yeah, and it's just me going.
Yeah, carry on.
Well, actually, if you were to, but there's the Greek concept of xenia, which is often like talked about as being hospitality, and they had the associated goddess was Hestia, who's the goddess of the hearth, you know, the heart of the home. But xenia, which we can see in words like xenophobic. So xenos meant like stranger, or somebody who's not from your land. And it could have both positive and negative connotations. Xenia was how you treated people that were not from your land, and particularly how they were received in your home. Because in ancient Greece, people traveled, and there were some inns, but like you could be traveling a long day, you could be going through a landscape that was full of wolves or bears or whatever, and you need a place to sleep. And you needed to be able to knock on somebody's door, and even if they were some random farmstead, you know, find a somewhere to lie down, maybe not a bed, but a corner, enough food and drink to keep you alive and send you on your way. That culture only survived because there was this reciprocity, and it was reciprocity towards strangers, which is really interesting. And then xenia became quite enshrined in that, like, you knew you could ask for certain things at a house. And then, of course, you could ask for too much, you know, and then you would be a poor guest, you would be a poor xenos, or you could be a poor host. And this was a really, really big deal. And I'm wondering whether a version of that kind of survives through cultures, you know, whether like hospitality, like in Ireland, our very person-focused approach to exchange, maybe that's a remnant for times where it's like we lived in these small communities and really had to take care of each other through hard times, and maybe if there was limited resources, we're like, well, I need to know you. Like, if there's not enough food for everyone, I'm going to give it to the people I know, and that's why it's really important that I know you and I know your family and we have a relationship and we take the time to chat every time we see each other. I don't know.
And I think that because I just wrote that down as well, that we've often discussed that there is a kind of what's the opposite of abundance?
Scarcity.
Scarcity. There still is that scarcity mindset, and I do think when like that thing of where you go, do you want a cup of tea? And it says, no, it's fine. And you go, you sure you don't want a cup of tea? No, it's fine. Are you sure you don't want to? Yeah, okay, grand. I'll go. Yeah, I do think it's born out of that. It's born out of, Jesus, let's not get the clothes off of people's backs because it's hard enough already. I think that vibe is still pretty strong, even though, like, we can probably spare a cup of tea.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that's probably why that is still there. And in a way, I appreciate that as well, because it's hard when people, especially if you're going through a bit of a financially tough time or something, like we're both freelancers, so it's always up and down. And sometimes you really feel like, oh, it's going great. And sometimes you feel like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is a bit scary.
Yeah.
Even though we're probably not in real abject peril, it always feels a bit closer, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe that says something about us in general as well. But in those times, it can be really hard if people are just like visiting and think like, oh, yes, I will just, you know, enjoy all this abundance. And you're like, it doesn't feel that abundant to me.
Yeah.
So I get it, but it's hard then as well, because it creates the kind of, what would you call it, animus or something to always be that way, to always ask multiple times. Whereas if you could be a bit more straight, you just wouldn't ask. There was a really funny clip of a guy from Friesland, which is the northern province of the Netherlands. Like, people always say about Dutch people that they're very straight, and I think that's right, like straight shooters. But it gets a lot worse when you go north.
Okay.
So Elisa's from there, and it gets a lot softer, but also very opaque and tricky when you go down south. So when you're in Limburg, and I think even people from Limburg would acknowledge this, that especially the south of there, like, it nearly feels like you're nearly in Belgium and France, you know.
Right.
And it's very different, and it's a lot more like gossiping behind each other's backs and that kind of thing. But there's a really funny clip of this kind of Frisian guy who was just like, so would you want a cup of coffee? And this guy, the interviewer or someone's like, yeah. He's like, well, I'm not offering. Just like, but it's like, that's the opposite then. That's too straight, or that's too far. But just thinking back on what you were saying, I like that about towards the stranger. I suppose that's a very tricky topic as well. I don't necessarily want to go into that too far, but I do think sometimes about, like, we have the boundaries of the nation state, and that is how we govern the international world to some extent, even though there's a lot of stuff happening that transgresses, that not transgresses, not in a negative way, but just is across borders. But then, like, there is a real thing about how hospitable should we be to people in trouble, but how much do we actually have ourselves? And obviously, like you said, there might be a culture of that. And I think in Ireland, there's actually quite a welcoming culture towards people coming in from outside. But then I also understand that people go, yeah, but it's not as if it's great for Irish people already, you know. And also, I'm coming in here, so you can, you know, maybe I need to be turfed out as well. But I don't even want to necessarily make a point about that. But I kind of... recently, there's been a bit of stuff online about people saying we need to be able to talk about this. And I think that's very true. But there's a huge discomfort, I think, in Irish people to talk about that. Because I do think there's a real sense of the underdog and always looking after the underdog, and having been that person who's gone to distant shores as well. I think it's powerful. It's a powerful part of Irish culture that it feels to me like it's a very welcoming country. I've definitely benefited from it being such a welcoming country. But then you also have to be able to talk about that, because it has so much impact, you know. So
yeah,
that's a dicey one, and that's not necessarily where I want to go. Well, I don't think what I said there is dicey, but you know what I mean. It's adjacent to dark things, and I don't think necessarily you and I have very strong.
Well, you can also agree with. You can agree with a concept, but also have some questions about its execution.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I mean.
You know, and there's definitely chats to be had there. But or there should be freedom to have chats there.
That's exactly really what I meant to say. Thank you. That's it. But it's super interesting, and I'm always amazed at how. Because I think in the kind of the recent years when there was a lot of identity politics type discussions about groups, that a lot of that ticked me off, because I'm a bit like, we're really losing sight of the individual, and that's always a bit scary to me. But there's probably a bit of history there as well. Like Holland was occupied by the Germans very recently, and that was it's funny in a way, because the fascism was a very collectivist ideology, but then people who now say they oppose fascism are also quite collectivist in their thinking, you know. But where did I want to go with that? That I've always had a bit of an allergy to that kind of thinking, but I am also now, when I've given that more space, realizing that there are really collective cultural things that do exist, you know. Yeah. That like there is a reality to that as well. It's just about holding that balance.
It's very interesting. I think the pendulum is really swinging.
Yeah.
I think we are coming. I think the pendulum reached a kind of an extreme of population-based approaches to everything. Yeah. Population-based approach to identity. Population-based approach to governance. Population-based approach to health. Yeah. You know, everything is based on populations, on groups, and the individual is quite lost in there. And quite simply, I think we need both. I think you need to be able to hold both. Like, for example, if you have, I remember there was a lad in my school, and he was my age, and he had dyslexia, but he wasn't diagnosed until like the last year of school. And we had our graduation night. We went out drinking, and some of the teachers would come out with us. And there was a physics teacher who used to give this guy a hard time when he was a bit younger. And this guy, this dyslexic fella, you know, he had a few pints and he went up and he was like, "You son of a bitch, you made fun of, you were pushing me so hard, you know." And he was like, "Turns out I'm dyslexic, and how do you feel about that?" And the physics teacher was like, "So you're dyslexic, so fucking what? You going to lean on that for the rest of your life?" So I think, but I don't agree with either of these men.
No.
But I think that interaction is really interesting, because I think that there are collective labels, something like dyslexia, there's a lot of them, that are very useful for diagnosis, for accessing funding, for accessing supportive services. You know, that's really beneficial. I think a label that puts you in a group like that can be really, really beneficial. But then as an individual, you are much more than that label. Yeah. And as an individual, you know, you are entitled to whatever supports you can access, but at the end of the day, you need to move forward in your world. Yeah. You know, and the label might be helpful for that, or it might not. Yeah. And I think we came to a stage of like labels being very, very important to a lot of people.
And kind of sacrosanct as well.
Yeah.
But that's a very good point. It's funny, when I go into that direction, it's always the only thing I ever want is to say spaciousness, please. But it is, like you said, it's about everything being in its right place. I'm sure we could write that down for nearly every podcast. I know someone who had was diagnosed with ADHD, and then really benefited. So to say your point is a good point. Like she was diagnosed with ADHD, got a lot of extra time on tests that really relieved a lot of stress around education, and she was very smart, so that wasn't the issue. And then that really helped through secondary school, especially because you're kind of still, sure we talked about the teenage stuff, but you're in a kind of a one size fits all type of system, whereas then after that you can either go to study something that really fits you, or you can go to work something that really fits you, or anywhere in between there. And then she was like, and now I'm going to actually let go of that label because it's starting to be a bit of a crutch. And I was like, fair play to you. That's something exactly in its right place, because you got the extra resources, like you said, that you needed. And then you were like, but also if I'm going to keep doing this all the time, it's going to get a bit annoying, and it's going to stop my progress in the world, because I'm just going to all the time say, oh yeah, well it's that. Yeah. Rather than, oh, maybe I should actually improve a little bit on this or whatever. My previous girlfriend, my last girlfriend before I met and married Yvonne, she really wanted to have me diagnosed with ADD, and I think we did a test and it was so high, but I was just like, I can't. it's not going to be good for me. I just knew, I was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Well, but that's for everyone personally. I'm not saying that it's kind of because I'm a fucking badass, but just like I just felt I'm gonna abuse that probably.
Well, I think it's different for people. So for some people, a diagnosis or a label is very, very comforting.
Yeah, exactly.
From my perspective, I think a diagnosis or a label is only useful when it guides action.
Yeah.
You know, actually, if a label like leads to inaction, then I think it's harmful. So one of the things that's coming up at the moment is like endometriosis. Is a lot of awareness about endometriosis, and the biomedical definition is basically like, oh yeah, you have endometriosis. What can we do? Nothing. We can do some surgery, and it might come back. It might help it, or it might make it worse. And you can just take pain relief. And it's such a disempowering label. Whereas, like, just for anyone out there, but like Chinese herbal medicine, Maya, abdominal massage, acupuncture, there's actually a lot of different ways to work with things like endometriosis in a non-biomedical way. It might not use that label. It might not use the endometriosis label, but you know, it's there in the traditions, and it's an empowering way. So like, this is my big problem with labels. But to come back to, you know, what we were talking about, I can't remember what the comic is, but like at the end of the day, we're basically just very complicated, very emotional plants, right? Because, you know, these labels, they might guide you to like some healthier soil, you know, maybe like might say, oh, you need a bit of extra water or something. But at the end of the day, we are trying to be successful organisms within our environment. Yeah. And we all have a bunch of different tools and a bunch of different challenges. And at the end of the day, it's about knowing ourselves, knowing our environment. Sometimes we need to leave, and sometimes we need to stay and adapt to things as best we are. Yeah. And like, again, the labels you have for yourself should ideally be empowering you in that direction and not me making you feel completely powerless.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And then the labeling of others is also such an interesting one. I'm just thinking, this is a tricky one as well, but I'm thinking of a therapist once said to me, like when I was having some trouble with someone, and the therapist just goes, oh yeah, but that person is just this. And it was and this therapist, someone I hold in super high esteem, was very wise, and it was really helpful. And then a bit later, he was like, also, it's definitely a lot more nuanced than that. But in that moment, I knew that would help you because you're so to the one side of this that you actually need to see that side of that person, so you can let go of some things. You know, so that's obviously a very dangerous game to play. Yeah. And
or you can ignore this person because they have this label on them.
Exactly. You could just go where they're only a psychopath or a borderline or whatever. You know, you could just and that's the very dangerous part. In this very particular case, I think it was applied perfectly, but I wouldn't trust 99% of practitioners or people to do that because it's so easy to other people then, and that's what you don't want. What I was also, it was interesting what you said about endometriosis because a friend of mine was dealing with that and just got so much better quite quickly with just things like actually energy work and steaming. That's a very random thing to say, but because you mentioned it, I just want to put that out there because it's so annoying when people are disheartened by someone. So if I know this is not part of the podcast, sorry, but if there is someone listening, there's a lot of options for you. I just wanted to say that this is probably wrong. Maybe cut it out, Anthony.
But no, it's the labeling is very interesting because like it's a good example because endometriosis is a biomedical label. So for example, endometriosis also places it within an anatomical landscape. Yeah. Right. It is a dysfunction of the endometrium, of the endometrial tissue. So you're already working within a system that is reductionist. Yeah. It is a system that will break your body down into component points. Now, it's bizarre because like endometrial tissue, it is bizarre. Endometrial tissue can manifest anywhere. It's just most commonly in and around the reproductive system. But that label is not, I think it's back to the materialism thing. It is a description rather than an explanation. And it is a description from a very, very particular viewpoint. And it can be very valuable, but you need to understand that disease pathology, we'll just call it a pathology, is not endometriosis. Endometriosis is a label put in it from a particular discipline that has a particular set of principles and a particular set of treatment protocols and a particular philosophy of treatment. It is not all encompassing. And then there is other things like Chinese medical diagnosis, we could call it damp heat and blood stasis obstruction in the lower jiao. Same thing. But I would argue that our definition is more useful because it guides treatment. Yeah. So if there's like dampness, heat and stagnation in the lower jiao, we can clear dampness, we can drain heat, we can move stagnation, and we focus on.
And it already gives it more characteristics. Like that's what you're saying as well. With it's solution guided in a way, because, or not solution, not the right word, but treatment guided, because it has like aspects of it rather than being a little closed box.
Yes,
that has endo on it.
So this is what I think about labels, that they are. We will never escape them. We, as human beings, we need labels.
To simplify the world around us because it's too much.
Yeah, if we treated absolutely everyone like a completely unique individual that is in constant flux, which is the truth. You are different today than you were yesterday. But I need a label upon you, which is Bart. I cannot walk in like Zhuangzi and go, who is this new creature that has turned up in my house every day? It'd be wonderful if I could, but we need labels, but we also need to acknowledge the imperfections of labels.
But it's like, well, I think probably this is one of the main tenets of the podcast. It's just we always come to this point, like everything in its right place and everything with nuance. Yeah. Because it's like, whenever we go to something that's a bit sticky, like when I was saying something about xenophobia or something there, you just like, straight away, all these things start turning in my head of like, oh, don't sound like you're that, Bart, because then it's this, and don't sound like that. But I never want that. I only ever want spaciousness for ideas. And I've lost my train of thought. What you were saying there about labels. Well, I've also,
particular philosophies.
Yeah, I've also been thinking about the materialist dogma. I really think the materialist dogma is fallen apart a little bit, but it's also, like you said, the problems with labels is that we will always create our little theory, and then anything that falls outside of it we just don't get. And I'm sure that goes for Chinese medicine as well, but it goes for everything. But you at least hold that lightly, and I just see it in friends of mine who are very materialist, whom I love dearly, but they will just, anything that's outside of that, they just push it to a side. But even they don't see how convoluted sometimes the mechanisms are by which they do it. Yeah. Like there was a really funny, this is maybe a weird example to pull, but sure, I'm not normal, nor are any of us. Although that was another thing I was going to say, and then I'll go to my strange example, is that what you said about I need the label for Bart. I think that's a good one where we try to hold it lightly again, because I do notice when I come in the door here, I'm like, oh, that's Anthony, that's my friend, and all the other labels you have. But also I do a vibe check of what kind of stage are you in, and I'm sure you do the same with me, and especially because we do this, I think, and not with everyone. Maybe also because I know you quite well, but I don't have that with everyone to the same extent. And I maybe you and I are also more fluctuating than some people, or maybe we just see it more because we do a lot of stuff together and we see each other quite regularly as well. That probably makes a difference as well. Whereas if you only saw me once a year, you'd probably get like cordial, generalized Bart or something. So that's an interesting point. So that's another thing where we do need the label, but we hold it lightly as well. Anyway, the funny thing about example about materialism is there was this time where I was watching a lot of these Darren Brown shows. He's actually very much a materialist as well, which is funny. But even what he did challenged my materialist friend, because he what would you say? He's like a hypnotist, and he's kind of a magician, but without trying to be a magician kind of thing. Or what would you, in Dutch you would call it illusionist. Yeah, well, that's, so it's the same. But anyway, he did this show, which is captivating, where there's a guy who is kind of, it's called Armageddon. If anyone still wants to watch it, I think it's on YouTube. Spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about it. There's this guy who's he's living with his parents. He's grand, but he's really kind of a bit set in his ways. He takes everything for granted, lets his mum tidy up after him. He's really in a rut, And then Darren Brown comes with, is it Stoicism or something? He has this philosophical Greek idea from one of the Greek philosophers, where he's like, sometimes you just need like Armageddon to hit for you to change, or you need to think you are an Armageddon. I think one of these philosophers went for like a thought experiment of like, what if everything ended today? But then he engineers this for this guy. So he hypnotizes him. I think the way it works is like people sign up to be part of his experiments, but then they get rejected, but they don't, which I always ethically find a really tricky one. I'm quite unhappy with that. I wouldn't be able to, like, it's fascinating telly, but there's a lot of stuff where he goes, no, we did it ethically because of this. And then I'm like, I still wouldn't be comfortable with that. Yeah. Like, you told someone they were out of that and now they're in. But anyway, we'll put that to the side. It is still very interesting. So the guy goes into the experiment, but he doesn't realize he gets into the experiment. So he gets hypnotized, his phone gets hacked, or programmed, and he starts getting like kind of small messages on his news feed and stuff about, okay, there's something happening with the sun, there's some kind of something landing from the sky, there's some kind of parasite or something, and it turns into full-blown, like, and there's electromagnetic stuff going on. His car doesn't start, so they kind of dismantle part of his car, and then it's zombie apocalypse. And he just experienced a full-blown zombie apocalypse. It's fucking fascinating. Like I say, I wonder about the ethics of this. Like, they're really minded all the time and all that stuff, but I still feel a bit like, but it's fascinating. And there's all these, I think, really good actors kind of playing opposite him, and they kind of challenge him to actually be a lot more than who he is. So he has to rescue a young girl, and there's all this stuff happening, and he has to really show up and really be brave. It's quite moving, even though I wonder if it's correct, but it's really quite moving. And then by the end of it, they're in a compound. There's all these zombies attacking. It's really fucking scary and intense. I think it's 2 days or something. And then he leaves with the young girl, and he gets put under, and he wakes up in his bed the next day, and he's fucking delighted. He is the happiest man on earth. He goes to his mom and he kisses her, and he's so grateful, and he's out of his rut. And they check in with him a year later, and life is going fucking great for him. My materialist friend is like, this cannot happen. That does not exist. Nobody could be fooled that way. That guy is an actor. And that's so funny to me, because I'm like, I know that guy is not an actor. I'm an actor. I can tell that guy is not acting. That guy is terrified. Or they've found an actor that is better than any actor that has ever lived, you know. But it's so funny that you look at that show. Maybe if you're interested, guys, give it a look. See how real it strikes you. I think he's seriously hypnotized and brought out when, you know. Also, we know that works. Hypnosis works, especially on people who are susceptible to it, you know, who kind of can give themselves over to something like that. But to me, it makes absolutely zero sense that guy would act that out and create this huge lie in his life as well. And then he has to pretend that he's cheerful all the time. Like, to me, that's such a convoluted way to stay inside. And this was a very convoluted story as well. But I hope you get what I mean. Like, my friend needs to stay in materialism so much that he's like, hypnosis doesn't exist, which has been proven scientifically over and over and over again. And this guy is doing something so odd, but so convincing, because I cannot accept the fact, even that fact is too much for me, even though I would say it's not a very spiritual thing. Like, it's basically actually only at the edge of materialism. It's not even disproving materialism. Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what's coming up to me is the welcoming of a stranger into your home. Like, weirdly enough, it's like, that's what Xenia was. It was like bringing a stranger into your home. It's a bit of an act of faith. It's a bit of an act of going, somewhere down the line, I might be a stranger in a strange land, and I would hope that somebody will welcome me into their home there. Conceptually, materialism is like, there's a stranger at the door, and they're going, what country is he from? And if they're from a materialist country, you can come in. And if you're not from a materialist country, you're being excluded. And I don't know, that nice. Image is just coming to me there, you know.
That's a very nice conceptualization. I like that.
Yeah, and the labeling of it as well. In this, like, this is the thing about materialism. I had an acupuncturist friend message me there and be like, I have a client, he wants to come for acupuncture, but he's very science-based, he's very materialist.
Yeah.
And she's like, could you recommend some like really good high-level studies that show the efficacy of acupuncture? And I was like, I can. Here's some resources. There's loads of them. WHO, evidence-based acupuncture, British Medical, everything, right? It's it's a solved problem. But anyway, but I was like, I don't think that's going to convince him because the evidence is there. Yeah. Like, however it's portrayed in the media and by policymakers, the evidence is there. The science-based evidence for the efficacy of acupuncture is absolutely established, for decades. But so I was like, what I would do is ask this man about paracetamol, about acetaminophen, because that is a ludicrously dangerous drug where its toxic dosage is only double its therapeutic dosage, which was grandfathered in, which has no well-defined mechanism of action. And it's the two things it's meant to do, which is kill pain and reduce a fever. There's a lot of modern evidence now that says it doesn't reduce a fever at all. It has no antipyretic effect. So either the modern research is wrong or we've been using it wrong for decades. Yeah. And that's paracetamol. That's one drug that is available in every supermarket on earth. So I'm like, the problem is not actually research. The problem is how the research is being received. Yeah. Paracetamol has a label of being a pharmaceutical, of being established. It will be allowed into the home. Yeah. It'll be allowed into the home of a materialist very easily because it's a pill, because it looks a certain way and it feels a certain way. Acupuncture looks and feels very different. It is not actually about the evidence basis for them. It is about the labeling behind them and how they present. So, something I've been thinking about a lot.
I thought that was a beautiful conceptualization and tying it back to what we were talking about. It is about, the willingness of having a stranger in your home. And I do think, and even at your wedding, we could see this, that you guys are very open to all sorts of different people, and even some of the conversations you would have, you would realize like, oh, that person is coming from that side of oh, brilliant. But when it's held openly, it's brilliant. And what it's making me really think about as well is what my mechanism is for deducing kind of what the world around me is, and it's quite often it's just like how it makes me feel. I know that sounds very but it's kind of like, if I can have a really genuine emotion connected to something, there must be something there. That's not the way I want to say it, but it's like, I'm just thinking, this is such a random shout again. I'm just thinking of in Harry Potter books, there's this girl called Luna Lovegood, who is like kind of away with the fairies, and everyone's kind of making fun of her, and she believes all sorts of mad shit. But then you're like, clearly in the books there is this sense of like, but what if she's right? Yeah. And there's something like where I think Hermione, who's obviously this very academic character, kind of goes like, well, if you believe all that shit, sure, you might as well believe in anything. And she kind of goes like, yeah, I'm glad you're starting to open your mind, And it's kind of that funny reversal. But like that thing you were saying about the research, I've seen that so much, especially after the COVID, where people are like, no, I'm very science-based. I'm like, no, you're just authority-based. You like what the authority is telling you, but you're not necessarily the science is telling you. But that idea of being open to a stranger in the house,
And we haven't really touched on it, but obviously the reason it's scary is because a stranger in your house can cause a lot of havoc. Yeah. So, like, this is where it gets tricky. Is like you.
Yeah, and that's where you have to be able to wield that boundary gracefully. Yeah. Because I think if a literal stranger showed up to the door, you and I would kind of be I think we'd be welcoming. But there would also be like a quick kind of scan for some obvious red flags, or maybe something where you're like, this is my home. Yes. Or this is your home, but like it's very important. That boundary is important as well. And the welcoming is also important. So it's, everything in its right place as per usual. But I also wanted to come back to what you were saying about the teacher and the dyslexic person. Is that with this this reciprocity in relationships, there's quite often also like sometimes you will think hey, someone is not being reciprocal, and then you check them on it, and they go, no, I am being reciprocal. I just look at this completely differently. And that's an interesting one as well.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, I completely respect you and care for you. I do that in a different way. And that can be quite beautiful as well. It's nearly, sometimes you will have people who seem quite grumpy outwardly, and you're a bit like, oh, they're not super friendly, but then they will come to you and go, that was brilliant, I love that. And you're like, oh, it means actually so much more to me now because I see this person isn't a people pleaser, or something like that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. That spiraled.
Spiraled,
I mean it in a beautiful way, as in it started somewhere and it went round in circles and it kept coming back to simple thoughts or to similar places, but kept advancing. And very interesting. I think reciprocity might be a good title. Yeah.
I think what we figured out, especially with guest podcasts, is that topics are great because it keeps it a conversation rather than an interview. I think between ourselves we can sometimes hold it a bit more loosely because we're fucking meandering guys.
We are. We love it.
This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow, or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.